it's a great pleasure to be here, and thanks to Ted for putting this on and for all his amazing work over the years with Hempology and with creating an amazing atmosphere of tolerance and acceptance at this university and really pushing through a lot of boundaries to make a lot of positive things happen. I just want to tell you who I am, what I've been doing with my life for the last 20 years, about the marijuana plant and some other useful plants as well, and about where I think our movement should be going in the future. I've been trying to work to end the war on marijuana for pretty much all of my adult life. I don't think I'm the only person in the room who can say that either. I was editor of, actually I started at SFU at university. I created a group called the League for Ethical Action on Drugs. And with other students, we got together and put on events. I met Chris Bennett, who would come on campus and speak, and that was kind of really where I got started. After that, I started working for Mark Emery. He came to Vancouver in the early 90s, and I started helping him on Cannabis Culture magazine, which grew quite a bit over the years. I did that, I'll get the phone call, I did that for about 10 years. And then during that time, we also had the pleasure of helping create the BC Marijuana Party, which I think was very influential, and the Canadian Marijuana Party as well in 2000 and 2001. And those had a big impact, although I've moved on since then. Helped form the Vancouver Seed Bank, which is now run by Rebecca Ambrose, and they got a second location out here in Victoria, which is really good to see them expanding as well. And then I founded the Vancouver Medicinal Cannabis Dispensary Society. And we've now got 2 locations, and that's really set off a boom of new dispensaries opening up in Vancouver. Since we opened, there's been about 10 more that have now opened up, and a lot of them have done so with our support and guidance. And it's really rewarding to see that happening in our city. And more recently, I'm involved in the New Democratic Party, and I've been working within the NDP for quite a while, and it's been a struggle sometimes, but I ran for the leadership of the BC NDP early this year, and I think that helped a lot to clear the way for the cannabis movement within our party, and I think it was a successful run in many ways. But what I want to talk about is a little bit about the cannabis plant itself. We had some really good information about what it's like to be a cannabis farmer, but I just sort of wanted to outline how we got to where we are and why marijuana and hemp is illegal and how some of these things happened. And you know, the cannabis plant is the world's most amazing plant. There's simply no other plant out there that has the wide variety of medicinal, cultural, industrial, agricultural uses that cannabis has. And of course, we talked about the seeds and their amazing benefit, how much the plant can produce in a small area, and how well suited those seeds are for human consumption as a source of protein and essential fatty acids. But that's not it, of course. The stalk of the cannabis plant is very interesting. It's got a pulpy inner core surrounded by long, strong fibers on the outside. And for most of the history of the cannabis plant, breaking apart those 2 parts was very difficult. To get that inner pulpy core out so they could use those long, strong fibers required a lot of effort. They would rot the plant, let it soak in water so that they could dissolve that inner core. Or they would have machines, big like giant nutcrackers that you would use to break it apart. But it was very labor intensive. And it is because of that difficulty that hemp began to fall out of favor for a while. When the cotton engine was invented in the 1800s, and they were able to use cotton much more efficiently. And cotton, although it's not as strong as hemp, has some advantages. It's lighter as well and softer in many ways. Cotton began to take over, and hemp began to fall out of favor. It was only really used in those places where you had to have absolutely strong, durable fibers. So hemp remained as the fiber of choice for ropes, for giant boats, for sails, for those kind of things, but for clothing, cotton became more popular. But then, in the turn of the century, a device was invented called the hemp decorticator. And this was a machine that allowed the inner pulpy mass to be sucked out industrially, saving all this labor. And this was the time, I'm sure you've heard the hemp, the billion-dollar crop, and Popular Mechanics magazine talking about all the different things that hemp was going to make this amazing comeback. And it was on the verge of this amazing comeback when, surprise, marijuana was made illegal. And whether it was a conspiracy or convergence of interests or just a strange coincidence, whatever you want to call it, we see that hemp quickly was prohibited and fell out of favor just when it was on the verge of making a comeback. And it was replaced, or the things that replaced it, was cotton and more importantly petroleum, which upon our society is now greatly based. It's used for all those fabrics and also for medicines as well, which hemp or marijuana would have been able to use in that way. One interesting thing about hemp as well is the roots of the plant have interesting medicinal properties that have not fully been explored. And there's folks that are out there that are making cannabis root-based topical ointments and medications that actually work quite well. And interestingly, the roots are not prohibited. So if you're growing hemp roots, I'd be curious to see if you could take those roots and use them to make medicinal products. There's no THC or cannabinoids in there, but we do have suppliers who produce those products for some dispensaries. I think that could be an interesting way to get hemp medicine out there and kind of bypass the whole concern about the flowering tops. And one other interesting thing about hemp is that hemp might actually be more medicinally valuable than marijuana is. And that sounds strange to say, but as we're discovering more about the different cannabinoids in marijuana, we know that THC, tetrahydrocannabinol, is the most well-known and one of the most prevalent cannabinoids in marijuana, and most breeders who are growing marijuana are striving to increase their rates of the percentage of THC in the plant. But it's not the only cannabinoid, and there's other ones, CBN, CBD, CBG, whatever, a whole variety of different letters. But CBD and CBN are more predominant in the hemp plant than they are in marijuana plants. That's how actually they define legally the difference between hemp and marijuana is the ratio of how much THC is in the plant. And these cannabinoids are being found to have medicinal properties that are better than THC in terms of their ability to destroy cancer cells. And hopefully we all know that cannabinoids have an amazing ability to destroy cancer cells. CBD also is better for antispasmodic, to deal with spasmodic ailments like epilepsy and multiple sclerosis. And in some cases, pure THC can actually be harmful for epileptics. It can trigger epileptic seizures by itself, and then you need a combination or a more CBD focus. So a vision of the future might be growing lots of cannabis hemp, extracting those resins and cannabinoids off and producing products that may not be extremely psychoactive but can have amazing medicinal benefits. And that, I think, is part of the future of the cannabis plant. Now I just want to divert for a little bit and talk about some of the other wonderful plants that are out there, because I like to say that the war on drugs is really a war on plants, and it's not just a war on the marijuana plant. And in my opinion, too many people who are marijuana activists believe that the other drugs and other plants are harmful and dangerous, and they must be prohibited, but because marijuana is intrinsically safe and very difficult to overdose, and is not harmful in that sense, that marijuana is okay. But let me tell you that there's no plant on this earth that should be prohibited, and that all plants have amazing benefits and amazing medicinal uses, and that goes especially for the ones that have been banned, whether it be coca leaf, opium poppy, psilocybe mushroom, peyote, ayahuasca, or cat, or any of the other herbs. All of these plants are used in a culturally relevant, beneficial, medicinal, social way in their original forms. And it is only when we extract them down to extremely concentrated versions of themselves that they then become harmful to us, and that we then have a risk of overdose or death or those kind of things. And so the coca plant, the coca leaf, is an amazingly wonderful leaf. The coca leaf, aside from giving stimulation, is also incredibly high in it's higher than meat in protein, it's higher than milk and calcium, it's full of vitamins and nutrients. Chewing coca leaf is beneficial to human health and the human body, and it's used as such by the people that use it in South America. It's a medicinal treatment for altitude sickness. It helps the body function more efficiently. It can be very useful and beneficial. But when concentrated down to a pure form, then it can be harmful. And for a while at the Vancouver Seed Bank, when I was involved there, we were bringing in raw coca leaf from South America and selling coca leaf, whole coca leaf products to people, anybody who wanted to come buy them, any adults. And we had many people telling us they were cocaine users. And then when they chewed coca leaf or drank coca leaf tea, that their desire to use cocaine was greatly reduced, that their stability was increased, they saved money, they felt better. I strongly believe that reintroducing these whole plant medicines is the way to go. And what's interesting to me is that many of these plants, like I said with coca leaf and with cannabis, they're food sources as well as being psychoactive plants. And the same thing goes for the opium poppy as well. Poppy seeds, as we know, are incredibly beneficial and nutritional. They're high in protein, they're high in essential fatty acids, and they grow well in an environment where few other food crops will grow. And so these plants are not only culturally relevant because of their psychoactive and physical and spiritual effects, because they are very useful as well in producing food in environments where often a lot of food crops are difficult to grow. And of course the opium plant is an incredible pain reliever, and the doctors used to prescribe opium. They call it GOM, God's own medicine, would be on your prescription strip. It was considered the most, and it is still the most incredible pain relieving medicine. And for most of human history, relief from pain and suffering was a key problem with people. We have, now in a modern society, most of us don't suffer from great pain on a daily basis, although many still do. But in third world countries and other parts of the world where people have to do physical labor of intense types to survive every day, regular pain is a very common occurrence. And being able to have access to what is essentially a free and effective medicine is very important for people. And so it's a tragedy that opiate medications are not available in the third world. The World Health Organization has said we're facing a global pain crisis in many ways. Vast majority of the opiate-based medications are consumed in the US and North America and in the first world by a large degree, even though most of those who really need pain medications live in the third world. So, and finally, I would come to what I would call the psychedelic or entheogenic plants, peyote, psilocybe, and ayahuasca. Not only do they provide people often with feelings of spiritual advancement or better understanding of themselves, they also have medicinal benefits as well. There's been studies showing that LSD and psilocybe mushrooms can reduce or eliminate migraine and cluster headaches in people that have very little other option. Sometimes this can be done at doses that are so small that they're sub-psychedelic. You don't have a great mental effect, but you have a great medicinal effect. Other times they've found that a single psychedelic treatment can reduce or eliminate cluster and migraine headaches for several months or years at a time for some people. And a single trip can have that effect. And there's also been studies with patients who are suffering from terminal cancer and other ailments where they're not going to recover from. And these studies show that when taking psychedelic mushrooms in a controlled therapeutic setting, patients have a great deal of peace, of understanding, of acceptance, and they're able to deal with the intense emotional things they're going through in a much healthier way. And so we see that all of these forbidden plants, all of them, are incredibly useful and beneficial to human beings. But the one that is the queen of all plants, the one that is more beneficial than any other plant, I would say, is the cannabis plant. Because these other plants often don't have the industrial uses and those kind of benefits that marijuana also provides. And so, I've been doing this for a long time and working towards this, and we've seen a lot of progress over the years. Sometimes it's easy to get disheartened. The laws have gotten worse. More people are in jail now for marijuana than ever before, and we're going to see that spike greatly if Harper gets his way, when Harper gets his way. But at the same time, since I started doing this in the 90s, we have made incredible progress. When marijuana activism really started getting going, this current wave in the early 90s in Vancouver and across Canada, you couldn't grow hemp in Canada. Most people did not think that marijuana should be legalized. Medicinal hemp, medicinal cannabis was not widely available, and most people did not believe that marijuana had a great deal of medicinal benefit. And now we've seen all those things change. Books and bongs and pipes are not available in the 90s. They were forbidden and are technically still illegal under Section 462.2 of the Criminal Code. But with the bravery of folks like Mark Emery and many others, we now have we live in a country where marijuana literature, books and magazines are plentiful, where bongs and pipes and vaporizers and other harm reduction methods of consuming marijuana are widely available, where hemp is being grown, not as widely or as easily as it should be, but we are pretty much one of the very, very few countries in the world where hemp is being grown legally and industrially, where you can go and buy hemp seed food products that are grown in your own country in your local grocery store. We can go a lot further, but let's not forget what we've accomplished so far in this movement. And we've seen an incredible growth in dispensaries, from the one or two brave pioneers like Ted Smith and a few others out there who got this thing going. Now we're seeing an incredible number of dispensaries all across Canada, and tens of thousands of Canadians all across the country able to access marijuana medicines. And if they don't have a dispensary in their hometown, there's mail order services that will provide medical marijuana products all across the country. And I'm very pleased that our dispensary is able to reach patients who live in isolated communities or in Nunavut and places like that where marijuana is incredibly expensive, difficult to access, and highly risky to purchase. And it's very meaningful to be able to get marijuana, medical marijuana, to all these people. And also we've seen public opinion change quite a bit over those years. And now we're at a point where medical marijuana has something like 95%, 98% public support. That is unheard of in terms of public opinion, that kind of unified support for something that is currently essentially illegal in this country. Although I will say, we're also one of the only country in the world whose government is growing marijuana albeit low quality, poorly grown, whatever. But nevertheless, we're one of the only countries, I think, in the world that government is specifically growing marijuana and selling it to people who need it for medical use. And we could be better, certainly, but let's not forget what we've accomplished and how far we've come. And really, I think how close we are to winning this battle, and how close we are to finally getting over that hump and getting to the next stage where we start to see what legalization is going to look like and what this new regime